Okay, welcome. I'm back for the review of the so-called game of the day for the second round of the TAC Open 2017, and I chose the first game in the match between NoHat and Unsweet. In this game, NoHat is white and Unsweet is black. So we open A6, A1, C3, and they mirror each other for a little while. This is probably the most common opening on sixes at the moment. Some other variations are picking up steam, but this is probably still the most popular approach. NoHat continues all the way with B3, and at this point, Unsweet thinks it's safe to drop his cap on C2 and pressure this long stretch of white flats, which you know, you have to strike eventually. And NoHat just continues B2, a solid move. You always want to try and get in B2 eventually if you have any hope of going vertically, that is. And of course in this position NoHat does. B4, A2, which says tack, and Unsweet finally captures. There is no reason to capture immediately unless perhaps you fear C3 takes C4, but that's not really something to be too afraid of. Well, C3 specific. Yeah, C3 because that's the one that that black is pressuring, but of course he could also take on B2 once B2 is played, but if ever C3 up, black can probably just place a flat on C3 so as to prevent white from capping there themselves, and then eventually step onto C3, get a hard cap if it becomes necessary to. But anyway, we didn't have that. And here NoHat chose his idea. He's just going to sidestep using this strong snaky line that he's established. Unsweet says, I'll take this chance to put you in tack. And NoHat responds B3+, which is somewhat interesting. Usually you don't expect white to be the first to capture flat to flat, but makes sense in this position because Unsweet never really wants to step his cap onto C4, and in this position a white cap on B3 would be pretty threatening vertically. And even the threat of that is probably concerning to Unsweet. He plays B5, probably dissuading that. And NoHat says, okay, I'll just continue what I was doing now. D2. F3. F2. Tack in threatening F2 up and E3 down. So something has to be done here. Unsweet plays the obvious move, E3. Let's see, I said the obvious move, but it's actually the only move, isn't it? This doesn't work. This doesn't work. Yeah. It's actually the only move. So, C3 down forced, and then NoHat blocks him off with his cap. And now Unsweet's cap looks pretty out of position, and NoHat's got quite a decent threat brewing here, and it looks like the opening went quite well for NoHat. So Unsweet takes here, says tack, and now C4+ is perhaps a mistake in view of Unsweet's next move, which is to run away. It looks like, yes, this is a weak route, but again, this is right where you want your weak tile to be, right next to your capstone. And white doesn't really have too strong of a formation in this direction. So I think perhaps better is to wall, but walling doesn't look very good anyway. It's hard to actually play that. Because you've got to worry about Unsweet just stepping around. So I think perhaps C4 up is the right move, and you just got to be prepared to deal with this consequence. Yeah, I think B5 down is actually surprisingly strong. It's not the kind of move that you usually play in tech. Just taking and inviting a capstone to come and threaten you, but in this position it actually seems to have worked out fairly well. But NoHat continues the threat that he's got brewing now. A5, and Unsweet sort of reveals that he's got an actual threat going. And it's not super easy to sever, because B3 and that's not B3, B4 and A3 both have to be covered, and C1 and B1 both have to be covered, which is not very pleasant. So we're probably going to have to see a wall incoming, and we do. He chooses B1, which makes sense, pressuring B2. Continues, tech, takes, B4, and then B1 plus, which is a little bit surprising when you consider that black can just crush this and crush with tempo because it's tech. But it's hard to see what else he should have done here. I mean, walling against any point other than B2 is just pathetic, really. And I suppose NoHat played A2 plus in order to take on B4 when after this sequence to take on B4. And now we've reached a position where all of a sudden they're even on flats if you take into account white's extra tempo. They're even. And black always has this move to increase their flat count, and white has no move to increase their flat count. So on flats, NoHat is actually losing, arguably, depending on how things play out with the reserve count. But he does seem to have the stronger threat in the position. With this cap on B4 and this with A3 being under white's control, it looks like this east-west for white is more threatening than this north-south for black. And this sort of fragmented east-west. This is not yet a threat east-west for black, really. You can't really call it a threat, but it very well could be in the coming moves, depending on how things play out. So black to move. B1, which is both offensive and defensive, so it makes perfect sense. It's blocking this, which is one of white's easiest ways to erode, and extending his own vertical threat, so B1. C3, which is perhaps a little bit surprising. When I saw this move C3, I thought, okay, why not this? The point being, the flat count remains exactly the same, because this increases flat count by 1, and so does just placing on C3. And we're always taught that in most cases, when in doubt, place. But this move here just looks so natural. Getting out of the threat, or getting out of the way of the b2 east threat, which was always looming, and you've got c3 now as you wanted, and I think the stone does better on c4 than on c2. So I think this was an alternative, and perhaps a better alternative than what was played, but of course it's tough to criticize. So instead we have c3, and Unsweet sidesteps. It says tack 2 ways, and now white is forced to take on a4. But black runs this way in order to not be captured by the cap. And now the obvious move is what NoHat plays. Gets a big group on c3. But Unsweet lets it stand. Plays b4. He plays takes. And now runs this way. And it looks like Unsweet is just going to get crushed on flats here. Because, I mean, look at c3. And they have the same number of reserves, the same number of flat count, and it's white to move. So it looks like white should just be doing so much better, but after takes, actually, black's threats are closer than white's. And NoHat admits this by playing a wall here. And in this position, I think arguably NoHat is worse. The flat count is even again, but look at so the flat count is even considering white's first move. But black has a move to increase this flat count by 2 and white doesn't. So black is ahead on flats, and he's arguably closer to a road, although this control of this like b2, c2, a2 area is going to be critical. Which is why I'm not sure that I would have played in this direction. I guess the point is that this area is so narrow that you can probably wall to keep it under control. Whereas this, if NoHat started to get strong in this position, you could have a serious vertical threat here. But I think there was a case to be made for securing up this area first. I understand that from white's perspective, or well, not really from white's perspective, but if ever a white comes to b2, black can take with the cap with tempo, yes, but I think c4 takes b4, threatening the b3 stack is just too annoying for black to seriously consider that option, because b3 cannot be lost. I mean, you could just take on b2 and then move all the way back, but that doesn't seem to have really accomplished anything. you've just made this group even taller, which is not really something you want in this position. Anyway, enough about that tangent. So f4, b5, and trying to cut off black's threat, and also potentially angling at crushing c4 in some positions to try to have a true vertical threat here. Black plays b2, and after a2, b6, threatening attack, and he takes this way. Of course, Unsweet is not in a position to crush because of this pin, and because the pin is so strong, it's hard to see black crushing this wall in a reasonable amount of time. But now, after playing b6 and then moving the wall and then playing c6, black is sort of winning the race to see whose threat is arriving sooner, which is not good news for white. And after c4, d5, white has to start severing this threat immediately, which is not a pleasant thing to have to do here. And then c2 is played, a somewhat sneaky attack, threatening to throw that way, which Nohat notices, of course. And d3, e3. And white has to wall again. Not sure that white really had to wall here, but I think this wall is actually a sort of preemptive wall to try and defend these groups here, because white cannot afford to lose these without putting up a fight. Of course, if black were to wall, white can probably bob and weave and get away with those groups, but it's not really something you want to risk. And certainly from a tournament situation, this is not the way white would like his game to go. c5, b5, f5, takes is attack, and Unsweet has a choice here. Actually, quite a few different options. You can take here with the c6 flat and say attack himself. He can take b1 to a1. He can take with his cap, although that's not really advisable. He could take with b2 as well. He chooses the most aggressive option, true to his style. Takes that way. And after he moves the wall, Unsweet plays this move. Which is so he moves every flat. No, every flat except one that he has the capacity to move. So he moves 5 onto c3. It's obviously a move with aggressive intention, saying, you know what, you can have these two flats down here. I don't think it's going to matter. I have my cap in the center. Your cap is placed stupidly on a4. And yeah, I'm not sure I would have done this if I was Unsweet. I'm not even sure exactly what his point is. This isn't attack. Let's see, white crushing here doesn't work, does it? Huh. Not entirely. Not sure, actually, what that move was about, but NoHat accepts the sacrifice. C1, and NoHat's really feeling the heat now, so he steps this way, which is a big concession here. And after C6, NoHat runs because, well, this is a juicy target, and in this position, black is sort of threatening to crush this wall, so I can definitely understand that move. Attack this way now. Takes, and we've got a strong d4. White cannot throw to take it because he loses by road on b4. This. I probably shouldn't have spent time demonstrating that, but we didn't have many demonstrations this game. Oops. So after takes, NoHat walls coming after that group, which is of course a big threat because Unsweet cannot afford to. He could never afford to crush any of these walls unless he does so in some sort of tricky way that, with tempo that allows him to regain C3, or if somehow, by C3 I mean all of the white stones on C3. Or unless his cap somehow gets in a position where those stones become irrelevant, but it's hard to believe that would be the case with this cap sitting right at C3. So now we begin the capture wars phase of the game. Attack here, and NoHat severs this way after it takes D1. Probably not willing to well, not willing to give up the idea of this threat with taking on B6 and coming this way, as well as this cuts off this double threat before it becomes real. Though I'm still somewhat surprised that he didn't take on B4. It seems like the obvious move to do, because now, sorry, by C4 I meant B4. And now B4 runs, captures, and look at what you've done. And a wall is of course imminent, but the question is where? B3 or C2? I already showed you it's C2. Which is forcing this group to run upward rather than to the side, which makes sense, I suppose. Honestly, both ways look somewhat bad for white. This way threatens this, and this way threatens this. So this way would at least strengthen the flat count for black more, so I can see why you would guard that way. Unsweet spreads, and so in this position we see that white has all the walls, and white can go after many of these groups, but and this is also attack, by the way. Attack in two directions. North, south, and east, west. It can be severed both sides on B5, B6, or B4, so it's not like a winning move or anything, but anyway, what ends up being the deciding factor here, more than the position itself, because things are wild here and it's hard to see what's going on, how um, how many whites or how many cap reserves white will be able to extract out of these weak stones here. But what ends up being the factor that makes white black the preferred side here is that black is ahead by 4 right now. White to move, yes, but he's ahead by 4. And yes, there's a lot of stones he could recapture, but look at how many reserves Unsweet has left. He only has 4 reserves left. And it's going to take NoHat a lot of tempi to recover all these stones. Especially considering that black is making tack threats left and right and forcing white's hand. Of course, in this case, most of these are moves white sort of wants to play anyway, but still. Yeah, he takes on b6. It's probably the most desirable move here. Although it does let b2 roam free. e4 places a stone and says tack. White blocks this way, d4 up, which is the safest way to block, I suppose. But it allows black to get this. It allows black to get this move in for a +3 flat count move, which is very bad. And considering black has the opportunity or black will probably have the opportunity to end the game when he chooses. This is a very common trick that if black had only 1 reserve here and he does this throw move, of course in this exact case it doesn't matter so much, but white can say, I'll give up I'll take what you left behind, and now I'm threatening to throw this and whatever, but then black says, boom, I'll end the game. You never get time to throw this. So that's a common trick when you're the side that has fewer flats. That's something you can do. And so with that in mind, this move looks perhaps too slow to me. I think white might have had to go along. Oops, that doesn't block the threat though, so definitely not that. Let's see. Perhaps this. That's not really that pleasant though, because both of these groups are sort of pointing in the same direction. I wanted to play this, but it doesn't guard the threat, which makes it somewhat not satisfactory. And I guess after this, you've got to be worried about this throwing downward, although not really. Well, in any case, this was perhaps better, but oh wait, no. Sorry. That was a threat. Well then. Guess there's really nothing else for white to do. Excuse my criticism. I missed that. Oh, that's still not right. What is happening here? Okay, finally. So, whoa. Wait, what is that? Why are we on the last move? This isn't the position we were looking at. What's going on here? So we saw this takes, runs, captures, walls, takes, and E4. And finally I've found the position that we're looking for. Sorry about that. And apparently none of the more desirable moves work, so... I would probably throw well, It's not exactly clear to white that they've lost yet. I was gonna say if there was some sort of desperate move, you could say E3 up is better because it gives black a bigger chance to make a mistake, but not really. So white takes this way after we establish that none of the other ways really work. Black runs down, which is not tack. Captures, and now we have like an exact opposite of what happened last time. White's got the big stack, and black is pressuring it. But again, black has the power to end the game at their discretion, which is going to be very advantageous. If it were instead white who had two flats here, things would be very different. Meanwhile, white tries to reclaim their flats and black reclaims his. But we realize at this moment that there are not enough good moves for white. White has a 2-tempo move because white is even on flats technically, but white has a +3 tempo or +3 move in moving this wall, and that's it because this group has no blacks it can target in the vicinity. So moving this is only +1, so you might as well play a reserve at that point. So white only has one move that gives them +3, and black has this move throwing D1 that gives them +3, and has another move throwing the cap that gives them +3. And considering that black only has 2 in reserve, the game is essentially over. Because white takes, black plays another flat. White does their best to increase the flat count, but black can play... Well, white is on his tail for moving D1. So probably the best move is... Well, let's see. I was going to say throw C3 this way, but then actually you've given this you've given this group a +3 move. Black does retake. Let's actually see how that plays out, because I can't see it entirely in my head. And after this, no-head has no moves, and black wins. Similarly, so yeah, this actually does appear to win. I thought so, but I couldn't see it entirely in my head. Likewise, . Likewise, I think, yeah, well, moving the cap. So if you throw this way and white takes with the wall, you just immediately end the game, because then they haven't increased their flat count. So that was probably the easier way to win, but Unsweet played this instead, which allows NoHat to follow, so that move probably wasn't so good, but luckily this E1 stack doesn't have any significant move it can make because it's surrounded by its own pieces rather than black pieces. And Unsweet just plays his last move, throws this cap, and there are no moves that NoHat can play to increase the count or to increase the flat differential by more than one, so he just flats, and that is the end of the game. So Unsweet was able to win this game as black by a single flat. Although I think in this position he should have actually played this, because after this, he wins by 2. Or yes, he wins by 2. Or after this, he also wins by 2. So I think he missed an opportunity to increase his flat count by 1 here. Which again, in most games would not matter at all, but in a match, a difference of 1 and a difference of 2 is could actually be significant. But in any case, enough of the end game study. I thought this was an interesting game overall, with a lot of back and forth. And in many positions, it was very difficult to tell whose threat would actually be arriving first. And I think Unsweet did a very good job of going on the offensive. Perhaps I would say he went for broke a little bit too much in by playing this move, unless I'm completely missing the purpose of it. But that is Unsweet's style. Big aggressive threats and worry about the flat count later. And it seems to have worked to him. All this stack throwing was quite interesting. It's a good thing that for Unsweet that there were so many black stones in this B1 stack, and that Unsweet had to, or rather NoHat had to leave behind at least 1 white and 1 black stone, which is what gave B1 the opportunity to actually move forward. Perhaps, what did NoHat play here? He threw this way. Perhaps doing this just looks bad though, but to block B1, I don't know. It might actually be more resilient, but overall a very interesting and very exciting game, and I was happy to review it. So thanks for watching, I hope you enjoyed, and goodbye.